Okie dokie. So here it is, my 2009 CBR600RR. Bought it 2 Octobers ago, and yeah, had 1,000 miles on it from the dealership in Odessa, Texas. Took it home, rode it on the street for 5, 6 months, and then in May of 2014, took it up to Oklahoma for its first track day and my first track day as well. And this is what it has evolved into over the last 2 years, thankfully. I'm going to go around the bike real quick and talk about what has been added to it. When I got it, it was completely stock. It had a smoke windscreen, and that's pretty much it. So I'm going to shoot this first video and just educate everybody on what's been done to the bike, because it's always one of the first questions when I'm spoken to. And then I'm going to do a second section, or a part 2, of what it's like to do a track day, how you go from, being that nervous guy at the track for your first time, and then all the way through C, B, and A, or level 1, 2, 3, however they call it in your area. And then really how you start getting into prepping it to race, which is the stage I'm at. Plan to start my first race in March at Arroyo Seco in New Mexico, and we'll go from there. So we'll just start from the front and kind of work our way around the bike. The bodywork that you see is Optimal race fairings. They're based in LA, Los Angeles, California, and from what I understand, they do their molding in the U.S. and they do their molding and design work in China, but it's actually molded in the U.S. So they boast about their quality and their fitment relative to other brands at a much lower price. And if you went to Shark Skins, Armor Body, something of that nature. And I got to say, I'm actually pretty impressed. They come packaged nicely. I'm a little ticked off that they ship FedEx, but it is what it is, I suppose. They package them really nicely. It's all bubble wrapped. No piece of fiberglass was touching another piece of fiberglass, which I liked. I really took them out of the box, scuffed them, wiped them down, and spray painted them with Rust-Oleum flat paint, just out of a rattle can. The lower, the tail, that's all flat matte black, and then the upper and the tank are the camouflage dark forest green. They're both Rust-Oleum, both out of a rattle can. And I got to say, I'm pretty pleased with how the paint looks. I didn't clear coat it or anything to make it look pretty, because it's a track bike now to be a race bike. But pretty good overall, I would say. The windscreen is also from Optimal. I think it was like $25 for the windscreen, which is a fairly good price. And then they sent me Zeus fasteners to go with it, which lined up pretty well. And then we'll just start from the front. Yellow backing and numbers from Cycle Gear. Anybody can get that for $20 or so. For the suspension up front, I have Öhlins valving. So they're not 30mm cartridge kits, but they are the shims of valves. I got the springs for my weight, and also Öhlins fork oil. And it makes a pretty big difference on the front end, just having that cheaper option rather than going with the full cartridge kit and spending $1,200, $1,300, $1,400, $1,500. But I would definitely recommend, as you start getting into the faster groups and you learn to brake later and later and go harder and harder on the brakes, upgrading your suspension. Real quick tangent on the order of upgrades I would do to a track bike. I think a lot of people misinterpret what's important. Everybody wants to make their bike go faster, and the bike is plenty fast enough as it comes out of the crate. It's not necessarily horsepower that makes you reduce your lap times. It's more involved with you actually being able to make the bike get around the track faster. And that's primarily a result of how well you feel the bike, or the feedback that you're getting from the chassis, the suspension, the tires, the throttle, the brakes, all that. And that transforms into confidence, which leads you to getting around the track faster. You know, if you can take it to a performance shop and spend $2,000 on the motor and this and that and the suspension and power commander, all that, but it's not any good if you can't turn the bike. Really, anybody get on it and twist the throttle on a runway and make it, you know, quote unquote, go fast. But everybody's primary goal, aside from safety when they take it to the track, or at least I would hope it's safety, is to get faster each time. And like I said, that's really a result of how well you feel the bike, the feedback that you're getting, which is ultimately transformed into confidence, and that allows you to go faster around the track, thus reducing your lap time. And that's a commonly misunderstood concept when people say they want to, quote unquote, get faster. So a quick tangent there, but you know, how do you transform that thought into, well, what should I buy? What should I do? How do I get faster? The most common answer that I'm reading from guys that have been doing this for a while is always tires and suspension. And, you know, I would say that's probably the most effective upgrade that you can do to any motorcycle, because it goes back onto that feeling, or that thought of how well do I feel the bike. And when you put quality products, you know, regarding tires and suspension onto the motorcycle, you feel the bike, and, you know, hopefully you would get faster as a result of it. Now, does everybody have, you know, 5, 6, 7, 8 grand to go buy a bike and then spend another 2 to 3 grand on suspension? I would assume the average person doesn't. That's just me saying that. You know, this took me 2 years to build. Most of it was done by myself, minus the suspension. I didn't really do that work, or the dyno tuning, but you know, so those of us who don't have 2 grand in our checking account to just go dump into a motorcycle, I would say start with things that allow you to feel the bike better, or, you know, create usable power for you, or allow you to more effectively control the bike. Now, there are a few things that do that. Okay, I would say that having clip-ons, or not clip-ons, excuse me, rear sets that allow you to put your feet where they need to go and let you shift appropriately make a big difference. I would say that the clip-ons that you decide to put on, the angle you decide to mount them at, would make a big difference. The way you position your levers and the free play that you take up in your levers, how far your brake lever's out, how long your fingers are. You know, those are all things that you can adjust and control in order to, you know, tailor the bike to how you need it to feel in order to go faster, or I should say get that feedback to inspire confidence. Something about this right here, this is a Motion Pro Rev 2 throttle, and this was one of the first things that I did to this bike, and it makes a pretty significant difference on the CBR. I think the R6s come with a shorter total throw or total turn in order to get to wide open, but I know when I first started tracking the CBR's throttle, it was to the point where, you know, you would, well, first of all, I used to hold the grip like that, like most people do. Now it's like that, but you would twist the grip, and then in order to get it all the way down, you'd have to collapse your forearm or drop your elbow. And, you know, again, that's part of that feeling of control and the appropriate positioning and feedback and yada, yada, yada. So, you know, instead of spending $1 million on suspension, those are much cheaper options just to start with, in order to get the necessary feedback to control the bike appropriately, so you can reduce your lap times, essentially, is what I would say. So a couple other things regarding this. I'll just keep going around with my products. This is a, let's see, that little blue thing right there, that's an IRC. It's a ignition retard controller. It goes along with power commander for the '09 CBR600. They changed the emissions in 2009, and it lost horsepower over the '07, '08 model. So they claim that gives you 6 horsepower back. I don't really know if it does or doesn't. But that's paired with my power commander, which is under the tail, of course, nicely velcroed in there. You know, I feel like it made a big difference when I put the power commander on. It allows you to, you know, map your fuel to air ratios. And again, it's all about being smooth. The more smooth you operate the motorcycle, the more control you have, the faster you go, yada, yada, yada. But I definitely thought that was a good upgrade, but again, I probably would have started with things where I can have a smoother feel of the bike rather than just throwing money at an exhaust and a power commander and yada, yada, yada. But all in all, at the end of the railroad, you know, it all came to the same outcome, so it worked out. Roll down here. The rear sets are driven D-axis. I really enjoy them. The pegs are nice and grippy on the boots, so that was a pretty good choice. I actually found them on the forum for less than $200, and then I just bought new pegs to go with them. So that was a pretty good deal. That is a 520 conversion chain. It's also driven with a front sprocket and a rear sprocket. And then if you see by the pit bull stand, you have a shark guard, which is woodcraft. I bought that used for like $25 on the forum. And a little bit side note about gearing. I don't really know a whole lot about gearing yet, but I was running the stock gearing, stock chain, pretty much stock everything except for power commander exhaust, all the way through the fast group, so advanced level A or level 3, however you designate it. And, you know, everybody's so keen on changing the gearing and getting a full titanium exhaust and getting Olin suspension and all this and that. But, you know, the bikes they're fast out of the crate. And even the stock suspension, you know, now that I have a Penske and Olin's up front, do I notice a difference? Absolutely. But, you know, I really do believe that you can get through all 3 levels running pretty decent times in the top group with the stock setup. And it makes you a better rider because you learn how to feel the bike, get the most out of what comes with the bike, and then, you know, when you upgrade to premium products, you just say to yourself, oh my gosh, like I totally understand why people are faster than me now and why they can lean over so far and this and that, increase their lean angle. But yeah, back to the gearing. That was a pretty significant difference when I dropped to a 520 instead of the 525. And for the front sprocket, I went down to 15 teeth, and then for the rear, I went up 1 to 43. Stock is 16 front, 42 rear. I went to 15 front and 43 in the rear. 15, 40, yeah, down 1, up 1. And then the 520, of course. And I gotta say that on the bottom end makes a pretty significant difference. You know, obviously with that said, the front end is a little bit lighter on takeoff, and you know, you can start talking about geometry and all that nonsense, but all in all, the bike gets up to speed quicker in what I've experienced. So yeah. The shock, you can't really see much of the shock. You see the reservoir right here. That's a Penske triple clicker. It's an 89-87 series triple clicker. I actually got a pretty good deal on it. I bought it used, again on the forum, for a fraction of what they cost new. And that is by far the most bang for buck that I've put on this bike. Between that and the Olin's kit up front, the Super Sport valving kit and the springs, it is by far and away the most noticeable upgrade that you can put onto a motorcycle. Now, it's also the most expensive, you know, let's start getting into engine work, but it allows you to control the bike because you feel the bike so much better. It's more stable, you know, the strokes are smoother, and it allows you to have confidence to go faster. And more on that later, I suppose. Let's see, let's talk about tires and exhaust real quick. So I've actually always ran the same exact tires for the last 2 years. So from, level one, first track day to almost 2 years later now, entry level club racer. I have always ran Dunlop Q3s and I have always loved them. I've learned a lot about tires, messing with them. I've burnt out a rubber by letting too much air out and being an idiot. I've had too much air in and, not allowed the carcass to flex, and I understand what that means now. But it's in my opinion, it's very important that you learn how to manage your tires early, or as quickly as possible, I should say. When you first start getting into this, you're on the street and it's whatever it is, 36, 42 front and rear PSI, and you never really think twice about it. You might read on the forum, yeah, drop them to 30, 30 or whatever, but you're truly, unless you're a maniac, you are not able to get the bike up to speed and get enough heat into the tires and the brakes and all that to allow the bike to work the way it was designed to work. You have to get it on the racetrack or a runway or something where it's wide open without restriction in order to truly get the performance out of all the components on your motorcycle. Now, with that said, I can speak, from a pretty general rule of thumb. You also have to factor in weather and other things you got going on, but 30-30 cold, 30 psi up front, 30 psi in the rear is a pretty good start with Q3s. If you're in level one, you're going to be safe at 30-30. They might ask you to put a couple more pounds in to the front, but you're going to be fine there. You're not going to burn up the tire. You're going to be okay. When it starts to get, a little more into the day, you might want to, depending on how fast you are, keep an eye on the rear. People tend to start letting a lot of air out of the rear, and then also the front too to compensate. But I've heard guys running in the low to mid 20s on Q3s for the rear once they're getting warmed up, and it's doable. That's kind of like slick pressures, but from what I've heard and seen, most guys are greasing them out and burning up the tire by letting too much air out and not allowing the tire to work properly. Or it works, properly for about 2 sessions until you start to get greasy, and then boom, you have, $125 piece of rubber that is no longer any good for what you need it for. So, yeah, like I said, Q3s, great bargain buy. They were doing a $40 rebate there for a while in the spring, the last 2 years, and you just can't beat it. Hypersport, 50-50, 50% track, 50% for the street. Anybody that is new to track days is not going to outride a Dunlop Q3. Like I said, I'm the advanced level, getting ready to go racing, and I'm still running Q3s and still, relatively quick on the track for the advanced group. I'm the fastest guy out there? No, I'm not, but I'm also not the slowest guy out there either. And they work, and they're a good buy. So, yeah, more on tires later. The pipe, it's a slip-on, it's not a full, it's an M4. This was probably the most, this is going to sound stupid because it doesn't really make a difference, but most people buy an exhaust and they buy what they want because it's kind of the go-to product for you to quote-unquote customize your motorcycle. And I actually rode with the stock can for almost a year before I decided to get a slip-on. I had been looking, and I actually put a lot of research into this matter, just because I wanted to buy what I wanted, and I wanted something that looked cool, sounded cool. I'm kind of on the wagon of it doesn't do anything. It's not a huge performance gain. Some people swear up and down that they got this or that because they put a slip-on on. I'm not here to argue that. I personally, I don't think it makes that big of a deal. It's more aesthetic than anything. But this bike does not have a full system. It still has a converter down at the bottom of the mid-pipe. I went with him for a couple reasons. The first one was that it's made in the U.S., which in this house is kind of a big deal, just saying. But it is made in the U.S. Their factory or their business or whatever, they're based in Dallas, Texas. At the time I was in West Texas, so I knew I would get it quick if it drop shipped, which it did from Sport Bike Track here, who by the way are fantastic fantastic, absolutely fantastic company to purchase items from, which is where most of the items on this bike are actually purchased from that are new. And anyway, USA made. I also, or number two, I should say, I went with M4 because I noticed that a lot of the American race teams are throwing M4 systems on their bikes, and you know, I kept seeing it in Cycle World and um, not Cycle Gear. I'm sorry, Road Racing World magazine, Road Racing World. Yeah, if you're a Trackday guy and you're not subscribed to Road Racing World, I'm surprised, because I feel like nearly everybody that you see at the track is subscribed, because they put up an awesome magazine. It keeps you informed of what's going on nationally and internationally with MotoGP, and then they do their annual track day guide, which is really a great tool for people that are new to track days. I feel like I keep getting on tangents. But anyway, M4, a lot of people going with M4, and I'm really glad I did. I love the way it sounds, I love the way it looks, and I also wanted something that not everybody else had. And if you go with an Akrapovic or a Yosh, you're pretty much just like anybody else. So that's why I went with the good old M4, and yeah, it's treated me well since. These little hooks here, I actually just put them on today because I took the rear passenger pegs off to mount the reservoir for the shock, but these are to secure the bike, strap it down when it's in the back of the truck. And yeah, it was just a Ace Hardware shot, but it works out pretty well. Let's see. Got some rear sets going on over here. Here, let's look at this guy again. All right, so Woodcraft brake guard, brake lever guard, I should say. Pretty much required for any racing organization, and if you don't know why, it's because if you're ever really close to somebody in passing, or you know, anything involved in racing where you're nearly touching somebody else, you don't want somebody to engage your brakes for you, especially in the middle of a turn, which is where you tend to get close to people because you're trying to hold the line, and because you know that's just how it works really. But it'd be pretty bad if you're at full lean angle and somebody hits your front brakes. You're pretty much going down at that point. So yeah, required for racing. Like I said, Motion Pro, this thing is awesome. They actually let you change out the reels in here to change the total twist of the throttle in order to get to you know, wide open. I have the biggest reel in, which is the least amount of twist to get to full throttle. This is an Evotech reservoir, front brake reservoir, holds the brake fluid. That's purely aesthetic, cool little upgrade. Took some finagling to clear the upper, but it will clear, it won't hit. But you gotta play with this a little bit in order to get it to mount so it's level, so you can put the fluid in it, and also so it doesn't hit anything. Let's see, these are the CRG brake lever. I think I paid $70 for this, or like 100 and something usually. I would say get levers that, you know, it's not that big of a deal, but you do want to get a lever that you like the feel of, because you know, this right here, this section of the bike is you got to be very light with your fingers, and you want to know how everything responds to the way your inputs work. And no, I kind of made an investment here. Instead of going with a $50 cheapie, I spent a little more money and got this guy, which, you know, I'm glad I did. Back to the Motion Pro. This was actually the first time that I took the bike apart, and when I say that, I mean under the airbox. I know the bike pretty well, down to the airbox, down to the throttle body, I should say. I haven't busted into the actual engine itself, which, you know, I really don't feel a need to do that. But this was a good learning experience, because essentially you have to route the throttle cables, there's two of them, a push and a pull, all the way down to the throttle body, because the CBR still has a mechanical throttle, as in their throttle cables. It's not like there's a chip here that says you're at 80% twist. It's actually mechanical all the way down. And in order to get there, you have to take, you know, the tank cover off, the tank itself, and there's like hoses on the tank, and you got to take the airbox off. And that's relatively easy. Chances are you can do it. It's going to be intimidating the first time you do it, but you probably can do it if you have a manual or you're looking at YouTube. And the difficult part was once you get the airbox off, you're pretty much at the throttle body, and unless you're extremely talented, which I'm not, you have to loosen the throttle body, which is basically down here, in order to get the cables, or I should at least say the bottom cable, because the top one you can probably get to, but there's two down there. The bottom cable, you have to loosen the throttle body to get it so you can access the bottom cable and secure it on the pulley system. And that part is a little tricky because there's a couple vacuum hoses down there. There's hoses on the tank underneath, and you have to make sure you're paying attention. The first time I did it and I put the bike back together, I got an FI light and I freaked out. And then I realized that there's this little itty bitty hose way down there, and if it's pinched in any way, it's going to throw a light. So fortunately, I got on the forum. I started looking in a haze and a panic, and I realized that was probably the issue. And I got all the way back down there, 2 hours later and a 6-pack later, and then you're like, oh, okay, that was the problem. And yeah, so I unpinched it, rerouted it the correct way, and boom, you're good to go. After you put it back together, of course. And luckily, I turned it on and the light was gone. So I was fortunate there. Let's talk about the stands. I went with pit bull stands. That's another highly debatable thing. Should you spend, let's see, I think the front's 130 with the pin, and the rear's like 115 for the swing arm spools, where it clips on the spools. Is it worth it to spend that much money? I don't really know. I knew that this hobby was going to be one of mine for quite a while, and it's one of those things where you buy it because it's not going to break, and then you buy it because it's made in the USA, which that's kind of a big deal to us, I should say. But I thought it was worth it. They've never let me down. They're sturdier than anything. I don't think you could break them if you wanted to be honest. But yeah, it definitely makes a difference when you have nice stuff. The wheels never get caught up on anything, fortunately. Just to put a little comparison, I bought a set off Craigslist. I think I bought them for like $50 in Odessa, and they were, I don't remember the brand, they were silver, like race were, I don't know what they were. And I put this bike on those stands, and can you get to work? Yeah, you can, but you can tell they're cheaper. They don't roll as easily. They don't grab the same way. And it's just, I ended up turning them for $100 on Craigslist, fortunately. But it's just one of those things where sometimes it's a little better to go with the good stuff, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Let's talk about brakes real quick. I don't know if you can see here. So you have your caliper here, your brake lines. These are, and then your brake pads. Sorry, brake pads, your rotor, brake pad squeeze the rotor. So these are Goodrich stainless steel lines. This is another thing I actually took a lot of time to research. I don't really know why they're all the same in my opinion, but I went with Goodrich just because a lot of good people, or I should say a lot of people said good things about them. And again, I wanted to be a little different. I feel like everybody has Spiegler or Gaffer. Yeah, it's just one of those things. I wanted to be different. I didn't care what color the lines were. I'm not here to look pretty. And they've been working great. And I definitely felt a difference when I put those on. And then we'll talk about brake pads a little bit. I bought the bike with 1,000 miles on it. It had like 1,200 miles on it. Don't make me a liar. And it had EBC. I'm sure the standard EBC double H brake pads, which is what I think like every crotch rocket comes with. I could be wrong, but they worked fine. Especially level 1, level 2. You're not burning up your brakes by any means. They worked fine. I found a pair of Gaffer 1375s on the forum for I think like $70 or $80. Had them send them, put them on, and I did that also with the lines at the same time, and I can speak for the combination. I can't just speak for the lines, but for the combination of the two, it definitely makes a difference, as in it builds consistency, I guess, for lack of better terms. When you're there and you're getting ready to brake, It's a consistent feeling throughout the temperature range, and that makes a big difference. Oh, I should mention, in the reservoir, since that day where I put the lines and the gaffers in, I've always ran RBF 600, Motul Racing Brake Fluid 600. It's like $20 a bottle. It's always been good to me. I've never really heard anything negative about it. I don't see the sense in spending $50 on brake fluid like some guys do, but it's, for what my purposes, it's always been good. In the caliper right now are SBS dual carbon. That's another thing. A lot of people say, oh, you should get the EBC, GB, FX, or whatever they are, and the Vesra or the Versa, the Japanese stuff. And they're probably right. It's probably the top of the top, but these are a little bit cheaper and they work fine for me. I try to be smooth to the point where I'm not, stuffing the corner and slamming on the brakes. Especially now that I can feel the bike so much better with the suspension that's on it. But when I grab the lever, or when my fingers are up there, it stops. So it's good enough for me for now until I start getting, I guess, insane like some of those guys out there are and gals are. But yeah, it's always been fine for me. So SBS dual carbon, I still have the racing centered level to get to, at some point. 77, no real reason for that, to be honest. It was available, and it was the easiest way to fit numbers onto the front number plate because of the angle, but yeah, it worked out. Let's see here. Oh, that's another thing. I guess to talk about some things that you have to change to go quote-unquote racing. I talked about the front brake guard. You're supposed to have a front brake guard so no one bumps into you. The reason why I have this body work, I'm glad I do because I'm going racing, but I low-sided at Indy Motorsports Ranch in Wilcox, Arizona in November of 2015. It was actually the day after my birthday, which is kind of unfortunate, but I low-sided in turn 5. It's one of the sharper turns on the track. It's the sharpest left-hand turn on the track. It's uphill and blind on the approach. And it was my first time using tire warmers. I went out with warm tires. I went back to get gas and water, and I went back out without letting them warm back up. And before I knew it, I was on the ground, which, I'm glad I didn't get hurt. I didn't go to the hospital. I got up and walked away, which is great, but the bike was a little tweaked. And then, from December, January, I spent a lot of time making it what it is today, with parts and paint and fiberglass bodywork. But anyway, the big thing about the fiberglass bodywork is that the stock bodywork doesn't have the catch. So the fiberglass wraps all the way underneath the engine. And they want you to have that so if you start leaking oil, it catches it rather than gets leaked onto the track, which is by far the worst thing that could happen to the track is it gets fluids on it, which reminds me we should talk about what fluids are in here. But I actually had a bad experience with that. One of my, it was probably my 3rd weekend going to the track. I was at Howlett in Oklahoma, which is also where I did my first track day. And somebody blew their engine and spilled oil on the track, and I was one of the first people behind him to hit that spot on the track, and I out of nowhere completely lost the front end. The bike felt like it turned sideways, and I don't know how, I don't know why, but I ended up not going down, thankfully. And they say, or I've been told it's because I wasn't holding onto the handlebars very tight, whatever the case may be. But I was very fortunate that day not to wreck my bike. But, do the due diligence of taking care of your maintenance and making sure things are safety wired and bolted on correctly so you don't cause people or other people problems at the track, because, they spend, I should say 90% of the people spent just as much time, money, effort into their bike as you did, to get their machine the way they want it to get to the track and play with it. And essentially that's what we're all doing. So, do your due diligence of taking care of the community, with that being said. Let's see, let's talk about fluids. the suspension has Öhlins, fork fluid, and whatever's in the rear. I just decided to spend the extra $20 to get the good stuff. I can't really speak to that. I don't know much about suspension. I've had all that work done professionally. I haven't messed with any of that myself, but as far as I can tell, it makes a huge difference over the stock stuff, like I stated earlier. For oil, I've run a number of different oils, always full synthetic though, always full synthetic. My first few, I was going with AMSOIL, and actually I shouldn't say my first few, most of the oil, most of the life of the bike, it now has 9,400 miles on it. I got it with like 1,200 miles on it, has been AMSOIL, and it's always worked fine. I could tell that it shifted more smoothly when I initially put the AMSOIL in, but after that I've always used high quality stuff and changed it regularly, to the point where it all feels smooth. But I can speak for AMSOIL. I love the product. It's just a little pricey, but really, anything's pricey these days. More recently, I have the bottle. More recently, I've switched to Maxima, which has again been fine, no issue with it at all. Now this is their, let's see, Pro Plus High Performance. It's synthetic, but this is the higher end of Maxima. It's a little cheaper than the AMSOIL, but I feel like as long as you're running the correct viscosity or the weight, and you're running full synthetic, I think you'll be okay. Let's see. Again, for brake fluid, RBF600, this is the stuff. Sport bike track gear, all day long. Great price, great product, yada, 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 the list goes on. If you're going to the track, level 1, level 2, if you're going racing, you need to change your coolant. Level 3, they'll probably let you get away with it at some tracks, but a lot of people change their coolant for the reason that if you spill it on the track, it's that green stuff, it's really hard to get off the track. Where this isn't that ethyl or ethyl glycol, whatever base stuff that comes stock in your motorcycle. I changed this out. This again was one of the first things I did. I flushed the system with distilled water and put engine ice in it. Some people say their bike ran 15 degrees cooler because they put engine ice in it. I don't know if I can speak to that. Did it run a little bit cooler? I think so. It's hard to say. The temperature is different every day. The racetrack conditions are different every day. Yada yada yada. But I do believe that this is better for your bike. And again, this is just a belief. I don't have any scientific proof that this is the almighty of changing your coolant, but I can say that it's not hard to do on a CBR to flush and change your coolant. I think it's a good idea, and again, it's one of those things where you're putting fresh stuff in, you're putting a good product into your motorcycle, and you're doing your due diligence to take care of the track and the other riders on the track. And honestly, I think you should do that, just like I think everybody should do that besides get on the racetrack. Let's see, we talked about bodywork. The chain's got a shark guard on it, or a shark fin. That's so if you fall off, your leg doesn't get caught in the rear sprocket. That would be very unfortunate, in my opinion. Talked about changing your coolant. Safety wiring, you can YouTube your own video on safety wiring. I actually haven't done safety wiring yet, but I will before I actually go racing in March. The basics are the oil filler cap, the oil filter, and the drain plug. Those are the 3 basics that everybody's pretty much required to do. And then you can talk about your caliper bolts and the axle bolts and yada yada. The list goes on and on. You can safety wire whatever you want, really, depending on how much time you have. I guess I'll go back a little bit to talking about really the whole Trackday thing, because I know a lot of people. I shouldn't say I know a lot of people. It's a very intimidating thing for a lot of people. I should say that. Was I scared. I wouldn't say I was scared, but it's a little intimidating. You know, you're going to a racetrack with your motorcycle. You've read all the checklists online. You know, you think you have a pretty good idea of what you need to do, and then you show up to the track, and it seems like everybody else there knows exactly what they're doing and where to go, and it makes you feel like you have no idea what's going on. And if you're fortunate, like I was, somebody figures it out pretty fast, which it's usually pretty obvious to seasoned people at the track who's been there and who hasn't. And they walk over to you and say, "Hey, man, you need a hand." Um, and I will say that, like, you know, one of the great things about this hobby is that there are some really awesome people that do this, which really surprised me. It's an expensive hobby, and I think that is part of the reason why there are a lot of people that are willing to help, because they understand the effort, the time, the money that went into, your preparation for the hobby, or executing the track day or whatever. And I have never met anybody at the track that was not willing to help anybody. I'll just put it that way. So, if you're prepping for your first track day, you went online, you read all the checklists, watched all the YouTube videos, you've already taken the first step to be safe when you get to the track and when you get onto the track. And the people around you are going to respect you for that, because you taking that initiative to be safe makes everybody else safe. And that is number one when you're talking about going 120, 30, 40, 50, 60 miles per hour at the racetrack. Because, unfortunately, people get hurt, people go to the hospital, people die. And you have to do your due diligence of not being an idiot, basically. And, the other thing, too, is, and I'll go on this tangent real quick, a lot of people think, it's kind of a funny tangent, a lot of people think they're fast. And whatever reason, I don't really know, I don't really care, but, don't be the guy. You've never been to the track, you're fast when you're out on the street with your buddies, or you guys go canyon carving, or you race up the mountain, or whatever. Just know that you're not fast. If you're going to your first track day, I don't care how fast you are on the street, you need to accept the fact that you're not fast, period, dot, the end. Don't fall in the trap and think you're fast, because you're not. And I don't mean to say that and sound like a jerk. I say that really for your safety and the safety of those around you who are also going to be in the riding group that you're going to be in. It's your due diligence, being humble, learning, listening to people who know what they're talking about, so you keep yourself, your bike, and everybody around you in one piece. Because there is nothing worse at a track day than a crash or an injury or both. There's nothing worse. It is what it is. And yet somehow every single weekend somebody loses it, goes down, hurts himself, whatever. And it is what it is. You have to be humble. Now, the good thing, the positive end of the spectrum is that track day organizers know that people want to get out on the track, and they know this to be a fact if people think they're fast, or they're new, or they're nervous, or whatever, and they do a very good job at grasping you and holding on to you and showing you in a controlled manner so you don't get hurt or hurt other people. And this is something that I regard very highly for track day organizers, whether it's, I've been to Ride Smart, I've been to Howlett, I've been to Arroyo Seco, I've been to 8-Track Total in 2 years. Luckily for me, my wife's in the military, but every track that I've been to, the facilitators, the organizers are very good at grabbing you and saying, "Hey, come spend time with me," or "Hey, let's go into the classroom and let me talk to you about braking, cornering, vision, body positioning, all that good stuff." So, do not be intimidated by a track day. It's the best thing you can do as a motorcycle rider to improve your skills as a motorcycle rider. That almost sounds redundant, but don't be scared to do that. And the other thing too, you got to realize is that everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of people around you are in the same shoes that you are, as they've never been there, it's their second time, yada, yada, yada. And the more humble you are, the more willing you are to learn and ask questions, the better off you're going to be in the long run. And You know, again, back to what I initially said, everybody's goal is get faster. You know, I've never met somebody that didn't want to get faster. And you do that by taking your time. You know, Dave Wonders at Ride Smart, he's got this great, Ride Smart's a Texas-based Trackday organizer. They do coaching in a school. It's a pretty good organization. That's where I did most of my early riding. I learned a lot. But anyway, he's got this saying, and he says it every morning, every track day, and everybody who's been to Ride Smart knows it. It's ramp up incrementally so you stay in control. And I can't think of any better words to listen to as a new track day rider, because it's so true. You know, people crash because they lost control, and people lose control because they're not ramping up incrementally. They're going faster than they're able to, and you know, something's got to give. It's simple physics, but eventually you crash. You're going faster than you can. You're eating up too much track. You don't know your braking markers. You don't have your eyes far enough. You know, you're not managing the controls of the bike properly, and before you know it, you're off the track. Once you're off the track, your probability of staying upright, especially as a new guy, is pretty low, needless to say. So, you know, take those words and use them to your benefit of ramp up incrementally so you stay in control. And the way he breaks that down is, you know, in percentage, like, you know, starting at 70%, then going to 75% of your total effort, 80, 85, 90, you know, but never really going to the true 100% of total effort that you're putting out. And then with that being said, always adjust one thing at a time. And for a new guy or gal going to the track, that's kind of a very foggy statement. But when you start riding at the track, you're gonna you're gonna realize that there's so much to learn about what you're doing, and a good way to learn and improve and figure out what the results are to treat it really like a science project. You know, a high school, junior high science project. And you know, every single one that I've seen or done has always been, you have whatever project and you change one thing at a time to see the result, and you either get a desired result or a surprising result, or you know, a result that you need, or whatever. But when you change one thing at a time, you see the result directly of your change, and then you understand the result, and then you understand what change you need to make to change the result, which that's kind of a lot to take in. But that's how you manage things, and that goes with a lot. You know, one session you can go out there and say, okay, I'm going to set brake markers. I'm going to say, you know, this lap, I'm going to say I'm going to start braking for this corner at this brake marker, and then you test it out and you see how it goes, and you say to yourself, I think I can go a little deeper. I can go one more second before I have to start braking. Okay, so you go one more second, and then you realize, okay, I'm good right there, or maybe I can go a little more, and then you go too deep and you run it wide, and then you say, okay, I got to start braking a little bit earlier, or brake a little bit harder, or change my body position, or whatever. But you know, in that sense, you're controlling what you're doing, and when you're in control, you keep the bike upright. When you're not in control, the bike, you know, slides, you slide, tumble, go to the hospital, whatever the case may be. But use those words to remain safe, and ultimately, you know, ride smart, get faster, and get better, and that's everybody's goal. Again, other things, other topics of, like, you know, change one thing at a time. Vision is big. You know, a lot of people don't know where to look, where they're looking. Basics, you know, corner entry, apex, exit, straight away for brake markers, all that good stuff. And like I said, brake markers. Another good thing to work on is body positioning, and this is hard to do by yourself because you can't see yourself unless you're, you know, magical. But I know a lot of guys and gals that ride with a buddy and a GoPro, or some of the instructors, you know, ride with GoPros, and those are very good tools to make you a better rider, because you ride around the track and you see what works for people, and you see what works better for you versus them, and you start saying, okay, I'm stronger, or I should say stronger, I'm faster in this section of the track than this person. And then you start, you know, as you figure it out, you watch it lap by lap and rider by rider, you start to say, okay, I'm faster through this section because of this specifically. And, you know, you generally speaking, it's because you're carrying more speed through that section than the other rider. But the hard part is to find out why. And, you know, you can imagine how this is going to play out. But when you find the optimal way to position everything through the entire track, every section, you're ultimately going to be faster and faster and faster. And that's the whole point of learning, because, you know, your first track day, second track day, third track day, you know, all the way up until whenever, other people are going to be stronger than you at certain sections of the track, and you're going to be stronger in certain sections than other people at the track. And, you know, that's quite a breakdown, but it makes a lot of sense when you see what's going on with lap times, and, you know, you get the GoPro out and somebody's following you, and you get through one section of the track where you're weak at, and that person like rides right up on you. I mean, that's the fastest way to know that you're slow through a section, because whoever's following you closes up on you real fast, because they're able to get through there a lot faster. And then, you know, they adjust their pace because they think you're slowing down a little bit. And then you get to the next section of the track and you're faster through that section. And then you start to pull away from them, so they have to close the gap, and they're like, oh, okay, so this person's a little stronger through this section. And, you know, when you have a control rider or a coach behind you seeing that, and who knows the track, who's done 100 laps around the track, 200 laps around the track, that is how you get better, because he or she comes up to you and says, hey, let's go talk about this. And you get a track map up, and you say, okay, what are you looking at when you're at this section of the track, or when you start braking, or, you know, when you start getting back on the throttle, or this or that. And again, it all starts with, you know, being in control and ramping up incrementally. And when you do that, you keep the bike upright, you don't fall, you don't hurt yourself, and you keep going lap for lap, and you get faster and faster. So, you know, that's just a little bit about track days. You can read a whole lot about it. I don't want to go over a checklist, because you can do that as long as you can read, I'm sure. But don't be intimidated. You know, go out there, have a good time. There's always a bigger fish. There's always somebody going faster. Again, I'm not that fast relative to a lot of people, but I'm also not the slowest guy out there, so I can say that comfortably. I guess I'll close it out by talking about the tracks I've been to real quick. The first track I ever went to was Howlett. It's in Jennings, Oklahoma. They have a pretty good program there for first day track riders. They force you, I shouldn't say force you, they make you attend the class and the novice group, which is, again, something you should do if you're brand new to track riding. But they have coaches there that show you the ropes of the track. Is it a good track to learn on? I don't really know. It was fine for me, but there is a corner, they call it the bus stop. You got to watch those corners on tracks when you come up to a real slow speed to make the turn, because that's when people get into trouble, because they're going fast and they're happy, and they don't realize that they need to start braking earlier, and then they boom go down. But I've been to Howlett. I like that track a lot. It's a real nice track, and they actually repaved it recently. So if you're in the Oklahoma, Kansas area, Arkansas, you might want to head over there. I would say most of my track day experience has been in Texas. That's where I bought the bike. That's where I spent the last 2 years before I moved out to Arizona. And hands down, ride smart is the way to go. If you're trying to learn, if you're, you know, wanting to get faster, if you're entry level and you want to get into this hobby, Dave Wonders knows what he's doing. You know, he knows what it takes to make people enjoy the hobby, and it's reasonably priced. It's actually cheaper to track in Texas than it is in Arizona by quite a bit, a substantial amount, 20% or so. And it's very straightforward. You know, you ride level 1, level 2, and then you get advanced level 3, and then you go into the CMRA and you start as a Provnov and you start racing. But, you know, that's not everybody's goal, but Ride Smart is very good at controlling the pace so people don't wreck. You know, controlling the attitude so people are mentally prepared for the day. You know, they're staying hydrated, and he makes Wonder Burgers and hot dogs, and it's all good to go every day. But yeah, I went to Crescent. I really like that track. I wish I could go back to that track, because I wasn't riding as fast, and I didn't have the same bike then as I do now, and that's a really nice track. I don't know why I like that track, but I really do like that track. Eagles Canyon is up at the top of Texas, or I should say Fort Worth, not the top, but that track has probably the most interesting layout I've ever seen, but the pavement quality is a little rough. It's a good track to learn because it's got a lot of elevation change. You don't find a lot of that in Texas, but it's a good track to go to. If you're in Fort Worth, you should try to make it out there. Texas World, I think they're still running it. It's down in College Station, Texas. Getting on to the high banks, that was a neat feeling. I haven't been on the high banks of any other track because I guess it used to be like a NASCAR track or something. I don't really know. Years ago, where you can really open up your bike and hit the top speed. That's a neat factor. I only went there once, but it was a pretty good track. And then Houston, I thought Houston was pretty technical at the time, but again, I went there once and I really enjoyed it. Let's see, after that I went to Arizona Motorsports Park in Phoenix, and that was very enjoyable. It's very smooth, not a lot of elevation change. The pavement quality is very good, in my opinion. The only downside to Arizona Motorsports Park is that they have the Air Force Base, Luke Air Force Base right next to it, and like a lot of housing, so there's a sound restriction. So you gotta have a baffle in. Fortunately, my M4 doesn't trigger the alarm, but I don't have a baffle in it, and I've always been fine there. Another unfortunate thing about AMP is they don't race there, which in my opinion, it'd be fun to race there, but they don't. But another good place to learn. They do the whole coaching thing, and they're a pretty good group of people out there. Arroyo Seco is in New Mexico, Deming, New Mexico. That's really laid back. You can learn a lot there. Very small scale, small track, tight corners. For me, being on a 600, I have a lot of fun there. A lot of guys and gals have a lot of fun on a 250 there. Kind of a privately owned thing, very family oriented. The guy's name is Roger that runs it. He has his own club racing organization, and they run them once a month out there, like March through June, and then I think September through November or something like that. I think 6 or 7 race weekends in a year, and it's a pretty cool program. That's actually where I'm gonna start racing this year because it's cheaper and it's a good track to learn on, in my opinion. And then the last track I've been to, let me make sure I hit them all. Yeah, the last track that I've been to is Indy Motorsports Ranch, which is in Wilcox, Arizona. That's kind of the southeast end of Arizona. And it is the nicest facility that I've ever been to, by far. It's 21 turns, I think like 2 3/4 of a mile, or 2 3/4 miles of track. Very technical, two really blind corners that make things interesting, and a huge straightaway. Real good time. The only problem is it's hard to find track time there. Desert Road Racing has, I think, 4 or 5 days this year with them. It is a little pricey, but it's a very nice track. It's also, I should say privately owned, but most of the people that are on that track are members, and I'm sure a membership isn't cheap, I'll just put it that way. But very nice facility, very nice track. I was actually there yesterday. Fantastic time overall. So that's kind of my entry-level video about the bike, track days, where I'm at. You know, the last thing I have to say, aside from like ramp up and incrementally and stay in control, is take your time. A lot of people rush this process of like building the bike and building themselves to get faster, and you know that's how bad things happen, because you either run out of money, or you hurt yourself, or you total your bike, or somebody else, and then you lose motivation to keep it going. You know, don't be the guy that throws $1 million at it and is trying to be the fastest guy out there on your second weekend, because it just doesn't work like that. It's one of those things where you have to run the marathon, not the sprint. And when you have the patience to do that, you're much better off. So it's kind of my tip. Yeah, feel free to comment, like, whatever you want to do.